Speaking Read Aloud Guided Practice. Let's begin this practice session. I will show you a question first, and I'll give you some time to try to answer that question. In this case, for Read Aloud, I'll give you about 1 minute and 30 seconds, 90 seconds to answer that question. After that, I'll show you the sample response, and then we will go through how to answer that question in a step-by-step manner using the method that we have studied in the earlier sessions. Ready? Okay, here's your first question. Let me show you the sample response. Let's hear it.
Marriage is a big step in anyone's life, and there is an argument to be made against getting married too early. As any newlywed couple knows, there is a huge amount of financial pressure associated with marriage. Firstly, the wedding reception and honeymoon will cost you an arm and a leg. Then, there's the matter of home loans, rent, and energy bills. If you're looking to start a family, your child's education is another thing you need to save up for. Teenagers should probably find a proper job before deciding to tie the knot.
Okay, the method that we discussed, in Read Aloud, you will have 30 seconds to 40 seconds before you are supposed to record your response. And the success depends entirely on what you do in those 30 to 40 seconds. And the very first step is your focus should be on rehearsing. So as soon as the question appears on your screen, look at the text and start rehearsing. And what are the steps? How to go about the rehearsal? First, you need to break this larger text into chunks. And simple rule of thumb, where you have full stops, where you have commas, those are the places where you will be pausing anyway. So that's one place to break it into chunk. And if it is a larger sentence, for example, marriage is a big step in anyone's life, and there is an argument to be made against getting too early. So now this is a big sentence. So here, when you see words like and, you see conjunctions, you can pause there. Or if it's a long sentence and you think there's a logical place where you can pause, then that's also fine. So for example, in the last sentence, teenagers should probably find a proper job before deciding to tie the knot. So now it's logical because in the first part, you are telling that teenagers should find a proper job and when? Before they decide to tie the knot. So to show that dependency between the two parts of the sentence, you can pause at before. So first step, pause or break into chunks. Second, you need to identify some words for putting stress. For example, there is a huge amount of financial pressure. So huge amount is one where you will put stress, put some emphasis on. Similarly, big step. Marriage is a big step in anyone's life, and there's an argument to be made against getting married. And again, you don't have to overdo this. Maybe 2 or 3 places you can consciously identify where you will put some emphasis on. And as I've been saying in the past, if you do enough practice, all of this just becomes a habit. Our main goal is to sound fluent and to sound natural. So if we start thinking too much about where to pause, where to put emphasis on, that also can impact the way you deliver your response. We want to take care of those things But as you go to the next level, as you practice more and more, those things will happen naturally. So you won't have to think too much about that. Next, so once you have identified the words for stress, you can pick some places where you are going to raise your tone or lower your tone, and the words where you put emphasis on. For example, marriage is a big step. So usually on those words, you always raise your tone anyway. Yeah, because raising your tone and emphasizing that goes hand in hand. Also, if you come across any list of words, list that you're reading, for example, here, home loans, rent, and energy bills, then accept the last part in the list. Whatever comes before you will raise your tone. So, matter of home loans, rent, and energy bills. And at the last, you lower your tone. Finally, when you are making a statement, if you are looking to start a family, your child's education is another thing you need to save up for. So, when you're making a statement, as you come towards the end of the sentence, then again, you need to lower your tone. So, usually, when you begin a sentence or when you resume after a pause, for example, in a comma, that is where you will sort of raise your tone. And as you come towards the end, you will lower your tone. Again, don't think too much, don't overcomplicate this. These are just some things to keep in mind. And when you see, for example, when I see that there is this list of words, things, home loans, rent, and energy bills, and it's comma separated, then it clicks in my mind and I'll just make a little bit of effort that I take care of intonation when I speak this. Other than that, don't think too much, don't overcomplicate. Finally, an important thing to do during your rehearsal is to see if there is any word which you find difficult. So, for example, in this word, let's say this is a fairly simple text, but let's say someone struggles with financial, they cannot speak financial. Then, first, you try to break it, financial, whatever way it helps you. You try to break and then try to speak it. If that's not possible, then try to think of a word if comes to your mind that is very similar to this. So, for example, a huge amount of finance pressure. So, if finance comes easy to you, you say finance. If final comes easy to you, you say a huge amount of final pressure. And if nothing else, you are not able to figure out how to speak and you feel that I'll definitely get stuck at this word, then you can just skip it. There's a huge amount of pressure associated with marriage. That's fine. Now, don't do this too much. Don't skip too many words on random videos on YouTube here and there. You might find some advice where they will say it doesn't matter, it's just speaking. So even if you speak half of it, it's fine. No, the scoring criteria given by PTE is very clear. The first and most important thing that they look at is your content. So if you take care of content, if you have taken care of 100% of the content that is spoken, the whole text, only then you stand to get the highest marks. And if you have spoken 50%, then about 50%. And if you totally say something random, so there are some very dangerous YouTube videos which will even advise you that just memorize something and say it, say something generic. Then if the content is totally off, you will straight away get zero. And these are published guidelines by PTE. So when they have declared it, they have published it, and they have been approved by, for example, here they have been accepted by Australian government. So you can be sure that due diligence has been done. So don't go by what you listen to, what you come across here and there. Go by facts, and the facts are content is very important. Yeah, but yes, if there's a one word or two words that you skip, that is fine. Because that also happens when we speak naturally. When we talk about anything, there are times when we get stuck, when we come across some difficult words, sometimes we can't pronounce. So that is fine. All right. So take care of those things. Let's go to the next question now. Here's the second question. Let me play the sample response for you now.
While the Republican field is packed with male candidates, so far, some of the sharpest Clinton critiques have come from women. It is surprising to most people that women will stand against a woman who has the strongest chance ever in human history to become American president. Clinton is perceived as an elitist, someone who is not in touch with the common American life, and therefore not capable of serving as the president.
All right. So, what's the first step? Yeah, you look at the text and you start rehearsing. And after that, immediately you quickly note down where you see a comma, where there's a full stop in your mind, because those are the places where you will need to pause a bit. And now look at this second sentence. It is surprising to most people that women will stand against a woman who has the strongest chance ever in history to become American president. Now, this is a long sentence, so you break it at a logical point, and what it seems here is it is surprising that most people will stand against a woman who has, and then the second part tells why it is surprising because this woman has the strongest chance ever in the human history to become American president. So you need to look at those logical breaks in the sentence. When one part of the sentence tells something about the other part of the sentence, complements it. So you then, to form a relation between those two parts, you have some words, for example, here, who has, and then those are the places where you can pause. And other than that, the commas and the full stops and the conjunctions, yeah, they are always right. You can immediately figure out those are the places you need to pause at. Now, the purpose of chunking is to show that you can pause what is important. You are not in a rush. But sometimes people pause too much. So don't think that it's fine if you, for example, while the Republican field is packed with male candidates, no, don't break it into small pieces. Just a rule of thumb, chunk should ideally have 6, 7, or 8 words. Around that, if you speak like that, you will sound fluent. But if you start speaking in 2 words, 3 words, then you will not sound fluent. All right, so you've taken care of the first step, that is chunking. Then identify some words where you will put some emphasis on. Some of the sharpest. So sharpest adjectives are a good place. Strongest, who has the strongest chance ever in the human history to become American president. Clinton is perceived as an elitist. So yeah, 3. So 3 are good. And then we also mentioned earlier, where you put emphasis on, that is where you raise your tone. If it is a sentence, a statement that you're making, then as you come towards the end of the statement, that's where you lower the tone. And often when you're beginning the sentence, that is where you will raise the tone. So while the Republican field is packed with male candidates, so far, some of the sharpest Clinton critiques have come from women. So you see, where I'm starting, I'm raising my tone. Where I'm pausing at that point, as I come towards that point, I lower my tone. Where I'm putting emphasis, that is where again I'm raising my tone. So if you take care of just these couple of points, that will be enough. It will make you sound much more authentic and natural. The next thing that you need to do, identify any difficult words. So are there any words here which you find difficult? For example, critiques. If someone does, then what we discussed, you either break it into pieces and then try to pronounce it, or find something that is similar to it. For example, critical. The sharpest Clinton critical have come from women. Or in the worst case, you can also skip, but don't skip too many words. And now you're ready. This is all this you have to do in the 30 or 40 seconds that you receive before the microphone opens up. When you hear the tone, you have to immediately start recording. All right, shall we go to the next question? Yeah, let's do that. Here's the question. Let me play the sample response now.
The free market is extremely competitive, and companies are constantly trying to gain an edge over their rivals. Merchandising and brand image play a major role in attracting customers, but they often lead to overpackaging. This is a serious problem since most packaging these days are made of plastics, which are not biodegradable. Some people blame the manufacturers for their blatant disregard, while others point the finger at consumers.
Okay, you know the steps now. You need to rehearse and immediately first see where the full stops are. Yeah, the full stop, comma, full stop, and any other place. Yeah, so this one, this is a bigger sentence. This is a serious problem since most packaging these days are made of plastics, which are not biodegradable. So you can pause at some logical place. Maybe you can pause at which, and you can pause a little bit at since. This is a serious problem. Why? Because most packaging these days are made of plastics. What types of plastics? Which are not biodegradable. So there are three parts to this sentence, and logically you can pause, take a very brief pause at each of these. And other than that, commas and full stops where you have. The next step, the free market is extremely competitive and companies are constantly trying. So that's one. Merchandising and brand image play a major role in attracting customers, but they often lead to overpackaging. This is a serious problem. Some people blame the manufacturers for their blatant disregard. So all of these words, four of these words, you can identify for putting emphasis on. And as I said, adjectives, the words that carry, which add meaning to the other words, and any other word which seems to contain important information, those are the ideal candidates for putting emphasis on, ideal candidates for emphasizing. And at those words, you will also raise your tone. And other than that, when you are pausing towards that point, you lower the tone. For example, when you are nearing a full stop, you will lower your tone. And when you are beginning a sentence, you will raise your tone. Any words you found difficult in this? I think most of you will be comfortable with these words. And especially if you have spent some time going through the word list, and as we earlier also discussed, spend some time every day doing some general reading, listening to some academic podcasts. That will expose you to the relevant vocabulary. It will expand your vocabulary, and gradually you will become familiar with most of the words that you may find in an exam like PTE. All right. So once you've done that, then all you have to do is sit straight, be confident, and speak. Okay, let's go to the last question in this practice session. Here's the next question. Let's see the sample response.
Introverts, or those of us with introverted tendencies, tend to recharge by spending time alone. They lose energy around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from other people. Extroverts actually find their energy sapped when they spend too much time alone. They recharge by being social.
Okay, now this one is a smaller text compared to the earlier questions that we saw. For a text like this, you will usually just get 30 seconds, around 30 seconds to rehearse. So when you start rehearsing, the commas, the full stops. So know this now. And if it's a longer sentence, for example, extroverts actually find their energy sapped when they spend too much time alone. So extroverts actually find their energy sapped. And then when they spend too much time alone, so those are the two logical parts of the sentence. So that's where we pause. Now you take care of that, pausing and chunking. After that, the next is identify words for stress. So introverts, so those of us with introverted tendencies. So introverted, that can be one. They lose energy around people for long periods of time. So long, particularly large or large. So when you have a couple of candidates which are near to each other, for example, long, and then you also have large, and you can emphasize or stress on either of these, I would advise you focus only on one, because we don't want to sound like we are emphasizing or putting extra stress too often. So they lose energy around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Or they lose energy around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. So that is much more natural than if I said it like this. They lose energy around people for long periods of time, particularly large crowds. Now, one after another, putting extra emphasis on, and that sounds a bit unnatural. So you have to maintain your flow, fluency, and also try to be natural. So if when you are picking candidates for words for putting emphasis on, make sure that they are a bit far apart. They're not so close to each other. And any words that you find difficult here? Introverted. So introverts, or those of us with introverted tendencies, if you struggle with that, see if you have a similar word in mind, maybe just intro, or you can skip it altogether. Introverts, or those of us with tendencies, that's fine. But like I said, don't skip too many words or you will lose most of your marks. We don't want that to happen. Now you're ready and the microphone opens. Start speaking. I hope the session was useful for you. The purpose of these guided practice sessions is basically to reiterate the steps of the methods that we discussed so that they sort of become a habit for you. Yeah, but these are not substitutes for practice on your own. So make sure you're also doing the mock tests, the mini tests, the module tests that we have.